Mic test, 1, 2. Audio fine, okay. I'm doing fine. A little bit nervous, but I think I've been looking forward to this. Absolutely. Sure.
Which is not picking up my microphone. Is that better? There we go. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, you wanna
Um,
lead things? So yeah, take it away.
okay. So, hi guys. This is a talk that we've kind of scheduled on Twitter that we basically both thought it was very productive to just give Peppy like the ability to put put out his opinions on stuff that's happened over the last couple of years, like stuff that's sometimes painted him as maybe the villain, maybe like the unpopular party, and just give him like the ability to respond to stuff and give his point of view to a lot of these quote unquote dramas that have happened over the last years. And this will hopefully be a productive talk that will give insight as to how the main developer of the game sees things, and maybe will like make some of his positions less controversial, and will like maybe also like give some insight into the position of the community, so that it's kind of like that shared experience and that shared like point of view, so we can both come to agreements on stuff. And yeah, so
Yep, or agree to disagree where that is
yeah,
appropriate.
it's always like there's always a point of view that a dev might have that the community will never actually share,
Yep.
but it's perfectly natural. It's just like very important to have that kind of point of view explained for maybe the people who are more violently against it, so that they can hopefully understand, and at least if not agree, then at least like understand and respect that point of view. So should I just start listing off some episodes of just like
Yeah,
drama
sure.
in the past?
Just before we get started, so you've given a list here. It's kind of. I just wanted to give some context. Like this is coming from a tweet that you posted a few days ago, which was kind of listing out the reasons that not necessarily that I deserve hate, but why I get hate, and your personal opinion on it, that I'm out of touch and things like that. So yeah, we're just planning to go through some of the main issues that have come up, which have potentially created this disconnect. So yeah, let's just go through it. Get
Yep.
started.
So also like it's not that you're necessarily out of touch, is that there's some things that um it's been a while since you've actively been like not working on it, but I guess just in the thick of things, just like in like using it daily, or just like knowing the problems of daily use and what people want, what people kind of have problems with. So
Yeah, it's
yeah.
a really interesting situation because us has grown into like this huge thing, right? And I guess my position has changed over the years, and I've talked about this before, that I don't really like the fact that I haven't been able to be as hands on or as in the thick of things as I used to be. Maybe in like 2010, 2015, during that period where I was part of the ranking procedure, following everything that went on in the game, like knowing the pulse of mapping, of modding, of skinning, of everything. It's a bit sad that I'm actually unable to keep up with it these days, but that's the economics of scale, I guess. So I still do my best, but I can definitely understand how some groups of people see that as potentially me being out of touch or missing things which I should be more aware of. And yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
that's
it
why
is it's like not your fault because like you're working on a big project with Osu Laser, and you just can't. You're just one person. You just can't be on all of these like subsectors of Osu and just be actively participating, and to have that sort of like hands-on, like I know exactly what you guys need. I know like this is a problem you guys encounter on the daily from your experience. You need to have that information, that kind of feedback given to you by the people who are actually like using that and
yeah,
like
for
active
sure.
in that medium.
And I just want to say that that's one of the reasons we started doing the community meetings this year. So I don't know if you've been following along with those, but it's basically like every second week we have an hour when anyone from the community can ask anything they want, and we'll give them a
Yep.
a proper answer from not just me but the whole team.
Yep. I've listened to, I think, the laser talk, and
Yeah,
then I've had the last, not, I think it was last week, right?
tournament
The tournament
related.
talk.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just I've read the document. I couldn't actually be here. I
Okay.
was
Yeah. Yeah. The documents are unfortunately quite summarized. I don't know if we can do a better job there, but yeah, it does miss a lot of the nuanced detail that we discuss. But yeah, we'll get to that because I think that comes up in one of your talking points in this list, the tournament related stuff.
yeah.
So we can touch on that
Okay.
again.
So I think we just fired off in like from top to bottom in that order. So
Yep.
um there's 9 episodes, 9 like, yeah, isolated incidents, some more isolated than others, some have like um connections between them that are slightly tenuous or like direct consequences from one another. But first of all, there's the um, one that was, I think, earlier this year. I want to say it was the beginning of 2021, which was the replacement of the reporting of a stolen map to like an authority figure at GMT and NAT,
Yep.
to like replacing that. So that was like a system that worked in the past, and it's had a lot of success, and you didn't necessarily need to find that stolen map yourself if you're the map author. It got replaced with a more like legally binding, a more legally appropriate, I guess, DMCA claim, which essentially requires the map author to not necessarily give their legal information. We've kind of touched on that with the with your initial tweets on that matter, but they at least need to find the map and
Hmm.
file like a semi-proper DMCA claim to actually have it removed.
Yep. That's correct.
So at the time, there was a lot of backlash from the NAT a little bit because they made that initial tweet, and there was a lot of confusion, a lot of outrage over that, and there was also a lot of backlash from just the mapping community itself because it was a system that worked. It was a system that like nobody really had a problem with. Even the people who didn't want to take down a stolen map could just like go to they could just go to a modding page and just say, hey, this is like either stolen off of my maps, or it's like something I don't really like you using because a map of mine of the same song or whatever
Yep.
just use that. But now you have to do this like much more formal process,
Hmm.
and eventually it came to a point where you said there was a lot of misinformation in that initial tweet, in that initial NAT announcement,
Yep.
but the system itself came through and was implemented. What were your thoughts on that? What were your like opinions on that changing
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
system?
so I did explain this at the time. There's a few different reasons behind that change. One is that when that announcement was made, It basically came from nowhere. Like I wasn't actually aware that the NAT members were deleting map content. And sometimes you mentioned that it was like mappers potentially asking on the modding thread to have that they weren't liking this their potentially their stolen copied bitmap content being used. But it was actually happening without mappers getting involved. NAT were taking it on their own to find stolen maps and delete them without actually asking in several cases, if I recall. And not only that, but there was no way for there to be any uh, assertion as to whether there was permission exchanged between the two parties. Like a mapper could have given another person permission to use their content. In addition, there was no way for if someone said that someone stole a map, there was no way for that the other party involved to actually counterclaim or if it was a false accusation. So it was a very weird system, and for me, the biggest thing is that it was a double standard because we have a way of taking down stolen or copyright infringing content for artists and for musical and visual artists, obviously, for backgrounds and stuff. And meanwhile, with this map takedown, it was all done in this kind of backdoor way where there was no logging. I was not aware of it, even though like I run these systems. I wasn't aware this deletion function was being used for those purposes. So for me, it was a bit of a wake up call that this was being done. So that's why I kind of jumped on it and said, this is not how it's going to work. It cannot work that way. From my perspective, running a system like this, I don't see the NAT, that community team, as being in the place to make permanent deletions of user content, if that makes sense. So
No, that absolutely makes sense.
yeah,
It's just that it was a very like what what it felt like was that it was an extremely like out of nowhere change
yeah, and as I
because
said, it was to that's because it was really to me. It was like I was like, what the fuck is going on? This has to stop now. That was from my side. And I know not all the team completely agreed with me on that point, but uh, it's the kind of thing where I having that kind of process existing was um, like I don't want to be responsible for that kind of thing going on. So it's like if I'm running this system, I need to be aware of how it's being used or how the community teams are having control over other users, I guess,
yeah.
or other users'
So like
content.
you're like covering your bases in the way that you don't want that to be abused. You don't want that to be like a potentially a problem that comes down later on to like someone deleting a
Yeah,
map that wasn't
exactly.
like
And to me, it's also just about simplifying the process. I mean, it may seem more like legalese complicated from a user's perspective, but I already have a very good DMCA, like a semi-automated process when I get these requests, and it has backups. Like it actually, I save a copy of the taken down content for X months. This is all done on one of the servers, an isolated server, so it's not accessible to anyone but me. But it does mean if there's a counterclaim or if anything needs to be undone, it's all there to go. And I also have like email templates which guide people through this process. So it's not like they're in the dark. If anyone sends me an email being like, this map is stolen and it's not a proper DMC request, I'll give them the proper templates and the guidance they need to get it taken down. I'm fully okay with that. And yeah, it turned out like that the whole deletion thing, it was only happening like once a month or twice a month, and that's about what I'm getting from users as well via the DMC emails. So I think people are okay with the new process. They have adjusted to it. I think it's working
yeah
quite well.
yeah that's like I've seen a couple of DMCA takedowns. I think the main like weirdness of it is that, for example, there was a DMCA takedown by I think Tatemai on Ayla, and then the diff it was a single diff, and then the diff got essentially like soft deleted from the game,
Mm,
where it was already a ranked map, and then it just got like completely nuked. You had to update it. You got an update prompt, and then when that update prompt hit, it just deleted the map, made it 0 stars, 0 circles, etc.
right.
Which was a little bit weird, but I think it's probably a better thing that you could actually do that to ranked maps instead of just like having to go to this whole unranked drama and like potentially just having to go through this whole bureaucratic process. You can just submit a formal takedown.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, it works really
that's a
well
plus
from my
to it.
end, like because it follows my standard process.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
So
it's
that's
well
a
documented too. Like now the actual takedowns are documented on the beatmap page. So if the creator of the map does have any issues, they can follow up. That wasn't done previously. It was all in a private document somewhere.
yeah. It was all like he said she said kind of basis where you had to like poke a GMT or poke an NAT and just do that and have that whole like social aspect where this time you just have to like, oh, I see my map is getting claimed, I'll just like email uh I think it was copyright at peppy or
Yep.
one of those. It's on the FAQ, I believe, or on the bottom page, like the, at the bottom of the OSU page there's like a copyright DMCA.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's one instance where I actually like I used to disagree with you, and I used to have this like very like why would he change a system that already worked kind of vibe, but now that you explain it, it makes sense. And even though it became a little bit more tedious, a little bit more bureaucratic, it also like solved up a lot of confusion and a lot of like what I'd say is a lot of unclear aspects you had from that. Like nobody would like properly tell you, oh, you have to contact GMT and an ATS, someone with the power of deletion to actually do that. Now you can just go to copyright and just like actually say, hey, my map is being stolen. It's my
Yeah.
copyright, etc.
I mean, at the time it was a bit of a shit fest because they posted that document ahead of time on Twitter, right? And I think
Yes,
that was done without even letting us know.
it
So
was
that was
like
like the first time I saw a lot of that content, which was
yeah.
why I was really like, what the hell is going on here?
I think it was a GitHub draft, but the tweet
Right.
has been deleted, so I don't actually
Oh, that's right.
have
I asked
the
them to
original.
delete it, yeah,
Yeah,
until we finalize things.
but yeah, I think that one is like very well explained, and that one, if anyone still has any issue, it's like they can at least respect your point of view on the matter,
Yep, cool.
which is it's just good. It's exactly what we're here for.
Let's move on.
Okay, so the second point that I kind of listed here is also I think either earlier this year around the same time where it was essentially tournament players like I'm a Fancy Lad, Fiery Rage, etc., like being critical of an ability that they had, which was to skin out multiplayer leaderboards with the health bar.
Yeah.
Like it was this whole complicated thing where they'd have to put a really big health bar, like skin element
Yep.
with which was like black and it would go over the leaderboard and would cover a lot of other like potentially nerve inducing gameplay functions like the leaderboard indicator on the bottom right. And that essentially got not denounced, I'd say, but it wasn't supported by you completely. You really had your gripes with that,
So
and
so
I think at
actually,
one point,
no. What happened? It's an interesting one. It actually broke. We broke the ability to use the HP bar to do that skinning, and it wasn't intentional. It was just like it was a change we made to fix some other issues with the game, like actual problems. So and we wanted to leave it in place because it was fixing. It was either cheating related or something to do with the layering of gameplay elements. So we actually broke that. That's why this came up in the first place.
I see. And then like people had this whole backlash about we do this. We have done this for the last 2 3 years when we found out we could do this, and it's something that really helps us to reduce a lot of that pressure, a lot of that nerve in like a tournament scenario that
Yeah.
we can use specifically for our tournament skins, and just like have one less thing to worry about when we're playing. And that came up, and I think still on stable you might be able to do that. On cutting edge, I think it's no longer possible. I don't quite remember exactly the result of that,
Well,
but
it's already possible to toggle the scoreboards, but the issue was that they still showed up in the breaks, and that's what
the
people were
breaks, yeah.
hiding with the skins. Um, so to me, that's just like, yeah, yeah, whatever. I've already explained my opinion on multiplayer and having these elements present to actually give you a sense that you're playing with other people. And I've said that so many times that I probably sound like a cracked record now. Um, but that's the reasoning I gave. And the tweet you've linked there is me doing a poll on it. I think I did like 3 or 4 polls with different wording because even like the internal our team discussions where like your polls are biased. So what I found out mostly from that discussion is that doing a fair poll is very hard, or one that everyone considers fair is very hard.
Yeah, some of the wording was like kind of funny. Like, would someone on an Olympic stadium
Yep.
have the ability to shut off all the crowd? That was like something that was kind of like made fun of. But like, while I understand that multiplayer kind of point of view, where hey, you're in the multiplayer lobby, you can't really like just not being able to see other people playing would defeat the point of a multiplayer lobby. That also, like, speaking from someone who's played a lot of tournaments, who's played like from even top tournaments down to like the really like 5 digit 4 digit tournaments, right?
Yeah,
It's an experience that it gives you a lot of pressure. It gives you a lot of pressure, and
for
it
sure.
puts you in a lobby where you're already like really worried about how the other person's gonna perform. You're trying to perform your best. Sometimes you have to look at a break, and you just have to see, wow, they have an FC or they don't have an FC. I need to not break here, and I need to like specifically focus on not breaking.
Yeah,
And
yeah, it
sometimes
totally
you're,
adds to
you're
the
really
pressure,
really
right?
nervous.
When you can see,
It adds to the pressure, but it's also like for some people, I know like I linked the Fiery Rage quote retweet, and that was like when Fiery found out he could skin out the break um, scoreboard, he was elated because that was something that really gave him nerves. That was
yeah,
something that
yep,
really it really gave you that like pressure, which for a lot of people is a negative. For a lot of people, it affects their play. It affects their confidence, and it really makes them like worried. It makes them like extremely worried that that specific feature that was removed was gonna make them play worse. And I can
yep.
definitely see how people would be upset.
Yeah, for sure, and I can too. So two things there. It's very similar to the first case actually, in that we only found out people. Well, I only found out people doing this skinning thing after we broke it, right? I didn't actually know this was feasible. It was actually, to me, that's considered like exploiting the game because they're using skin elements to hide things which we, intended the user to be seeing at all times. It was supposed to be there. So to me, that's an exploit, which is why I've already said my opinion on multiplayer, but um, when players get enraged that suddenly they can't use what is kind of like an exploit, it's a bit weird, right?
I guess like it's obviously something that was using a feature of skinning that wasn't necessarily intended,
Yeah,
but it eventually became so widespread. Just like we're gonna get to this later. It's like I think the eighth point, the eighth little incident, but it's something that becomes widespread, and then has either it completely removed or some sort of incident that causes it to be accepted, etc. It's like people are upset at that, and you can really understand the people but you can also understand that it wasn't supposed to be a thing in the first place.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like a frustrating thing all around. I think there's no really like good uh middle ground there.
Yeah. So for this one again, I'm not sure. What I'm unsure of here is uh because I didn't actually make a change here. Like I didn't. I mean, we unintentionally broke this, but the linked conversation you have on Twitter is like me polling about it to try and get an idea from the community, and that's like an ongoing theme. Is like from my perspective, I feel like I'm asking the community what they want and then trying to do the best to react to that. But meanwhile, it's in your points of like, this list which is intended to be issues that have come up over the years, which make people think that I'm out of touch or whatever.
I mean,
Where does that
it
come
makes a
together?
little bit of it makes a little bit of sense when you consider that a lot of your polls had like responses of like, yes, tournament players should be able to do this, or like this is probably a fine thing to keep, and then it
Yep.
got removed anyway. Like, I'm not gonna say
But
it's
there,
necessarily it wasn't a bad thing all the way throughout, because eventually out of that conversation we got the ability to hide the bottom right element through some option or like on gameplay and only have it show up during breaks and etc. But it ended up being a little bit like a little bit of a contentious point where you kind of went against the polls.
yeah. Well, I mean, it was already done, right? The only thing is we didn't undo the change. Um, but yeah, so that like you say that a lot of people are like, yes, it should be allowed, but I do know that there was a strong voice that was saying no, like the pressure and everything is part of the multiplayer thing. And the common retort that people are using is like, you're a fucking 6-digit player. What do you know? Or you've never played in a tournament, or you don't play at top level OWC, or you don't know how it is. It's very hard to make the unpopular, or the argument which is easy to have a comeback against in these cases. So what I'm trying to say is there is definitely like two perspectives on these kinds of changes that have been made. What we are like for this specific one, to kind of draw this one to a conclusion, what we have agreed to do with going forward with the OS laser, the next release, is add this as a toggle for the room settings as a multiplayer room host, so the host can choose whether to have the elements that you see that you're playing in a multiplayer game turned on or off for everyone. It's not, it's so at the end of the day, my concern is that everyone is on a fair playing field. They're all seeing the same thing. So that's how we intend to solve this. It's not gonna happen unstable, but that's the future plan that we have.
That makes a lot of sense, and it makes a lot of sense also because I think a lot of the worry there with the original intent is that the multiplayer lobbies can actually be multiplayer lobbies for fun and stuff. You can look at the scoreboard even
Yeah.
if you have a skin that accidentally like or that incidentally also like did that thing with the scoreboard, while tournament players can have a tournament lobby where things are a lot more serious, and then you can toggle off a lot of that visual stuff that would add pressure. So I think that makes a lot of sense as a change moving forward on laser. And at least I'm kind of glad that it at the point where laser is the standard for tournaments, which I don't think has come yet, and I don't think will come for the next year. Maybe I don't know how things are progressing, but
We'll see.
uh, yeah, there's always a little bit of hope. And I think that at the point where laser is the standard for tournaments, there will be a lot of positive feedback regarding that change.
Yeah. Yeah, and it does mean that, like, for something like World Cup, we can decide the rule set for the tournament. And we're planning on not just adding this particular toggle, but lots of new toggles for multiplayer to allow tournaments to customize the experience more. And, we're going to pull all stops. So anything that someone is complaining about, will probably add the ability to change that setting so that tournaments that want to run their tournament in a certain way, potentially reducing the pressure on players, everyone will be aware that that's what they're doing. That's how all the players are seeing it, and that's how it will be commentated and viewed by the public as well.
Yeah, like I think that it's just a good change moving forward, and hopefully we can get to the point where eventually we get laser where a lot of the things that we complain about currently or we've complained about in the past can actually not be fixed but be like properly toggleable or have this sort of option, because most laser is all about freedom as far as I'm like aware of,
Within
and I
reason,
really
yes.
would appreciate that
Yeah.
freedom. Yeah.
I have
So
devs that are working on laser being like, no more toggles right now. We'll see.
yeah, so moving on a bit with that, I think everyone can kind of understand at least um that that point of view and can at least look forward to laser where that's coming. um Another tournament player, another famous tournament player, one of the most successful, Bubbleman, he earlier this year, after an OS update that allegedly broke his tablet driver or made it have more input lag,
Yeah.
he posted a version of one of the OS files that would allegedly fix that if he did this complicated like put a file on read only, otherwise it update, or do this other complicated like file management within the OS folder, and then not immediately, but like very soon after you came into that thread and you basically said, "Don't download this file. Don't download any third-party OS files."
Hmm.
And don't do this. We haven't changed anything that would cause this, so I don't necessarily see where this is coming from to like prompt this.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts on that, and what happened kind of afterwards?
Yeah. So I don't even know where to start on this one because it's a shitfest from the beginning. So he linked an archived version of us from some um, third party file host, and there's no way for us to guarantee that that is good files. It could have a virus. It could unintentionally have a virus. I'm not saying that Bubbleman is trying to exploit people, but it could just have issues in the files. It could have had um, some changes which are again not intended to cause issues, but could have. He was pushing an old version, which was generally we don't advise that users use old versions. But anyway, my main point there was that he shouldn't be sharing these and recommending large portions of the community because he has a pretty good following. It got quite a bit of traction, which is why I said to take down the link to the executable so people aren't bringing this on themselves. Also, he was recommending, I think, that people, as you said, made it read only, which means they wouldn't receive future updates. And if they leave it for too long, it would stop submitting scores. And that's the kind of thing where we actually get, support requests coming in being like, my game isn't working anymore. Um, so yeah, that was my initial response. That's why I said to take it down. And I think his response was something like, fuck off. Um, yeah.
Well, his response was something related to like do something about the update or do something about the input lag that was caused in the update, and you had essentially no clue what he was talking about, which
Yeah.
as a developer I can imagine is like kind of confusing. It didn't change anything that broke anything, and someone is complaining about like added input delay on something that's essentially really vital, which is the half of the components of the game, which is like aiming. So like that was this whole like really public like flinging of shit that essentially made it made it either seem like Bubbleman was like having this either huge placebo problem, or that you were like completely obtuse to something that perhaps was a problem or a bug caused by an update pushed onto stable.
Yeah.
And like that eventually I believe got kind of agreed upon, that was an update that changed how some stuff got uh how the input was registered, that actually would make the input lag less, and so happened that people that were used to that input lag had the exact opposite response. They thought their input lag was getting worse because their
Yeah,
muscle
so
memory was off.
unfortunately, that's all bullcrap as well. Nothing changed. We didn't reduce latency. We didn't increase latency. We made no changes which could affect it. And like people did like independent checks on this. They did profiling on it, and we did our own profiling. Nothing's changed. Like I can't make this shit up. The only changes we push to stable are the ones you see in the change logs, and we intentionally don't break performance. We don't touch input. Nothing like that.
I see.
The only
So
during that saga, the only thing I did, we pushed like 3 or 4 builds out, um, just making no changes, like pushing them out with zero changes. And my thought was that maybe, we run builds through obfuscation and stuff. Bubbleman runs on Linux using Wine, which is like an emulation layer, and he uses a
yes,
very weird Linux setup. Like he's using custom parameters to get lower latency and stuff, and that's all well and good, but like it's very hard for us to support that, right? Because we don't run under that same environment. We don't officially support Linux in stable, at least. So from our perspective, like, yeah, it's likely going to be something at his end that's changed, or something that his end that hasn't changed but is somehow affecting the game, like whether something on his system has um, maybe he had some special setup for the hash of the executable, and the new hash from the update was different or something. Who knows what's going on there? But no, as we pushed out the extra updates, we did like a poll on it or a forum thread, and every update people were saying like, oh, this is so much better for me. I've suddenly started passing all these maps which I couldn't before. And the same thing happened when Bubbleman posted that executable, the old version, and people switch to it. They're like, I can suddenly pass all these maps. This has fixed all my problems. But
and it was essentially just group placebo, right?
every time we push this update, they got a different response. And quite often, like the first response we saw was what everyone jumped on, or it was all over the place. So from our perspective, it's like it's not what we expected. We expected people to be like, no, nothing's changed. Um, so yeah, I don't know. How do you deal with a situation like that? Bubbleman's final word on it was that we did improve latency. So I mean, if that's what the takeaway from this is, then all the better. I made no changes, and somehow we improved the latency of the game. That's a win for me. But it's a very you can I'm sure you can understand how hard a situation that is for us to deal with from a PR
Yeah.
perspective.
No,
When
I can
one
really.
player says they have an issue and that player is running such a custom setup that we cannot reproduce from our end.
Yeah, it's. I think it's a really like shitty situation to be in for you, and also for Bubbleman, where he's running this like very like on the edge setup where everything can break, every like little connection there can break. Like it's a very shitty situation to be in where you find yourself victim of like this change that didn't happen but that you perceive happened, that would essentially just make you play worse. But yeah, it's also like really horrible to be on the other end where you made no changes and all of a sudden there's a large vocal group that's complaining about changes that you need to revert that you didn't make.
Yeah, and I'm saying this like, to me this is all crazy talk, but I don't mean any disrespect to Bubbleman, and I know he tries his best to get super low latency, real time latency on his Linux setup, and each to their own. I don't think you need that to play on a professional level. I think it's a bit of a farce, but I don't mean any disrespect to him. Obviously, he said some pretty spicy things in that Twitter thread, but I don't know. I think we handled it in the best way we could. I honestly do. We had some very long internal discussions, spent a lot of time on that, talking about this internally amongst developers and just the team in general. Um, I don't know. I don't think we could have done any better.
Yeah, obviously, Baldwin finds success in that setup. Obviously, other people find success just running standard like Windows 10, Windows like even 7 or whatever, where they're just like playing OS on a quote unquote supported operating system, and to each their own, I guess.
Yeah, all I can
Where
say is all's well that ends well, and that debacle is kind of over now. So that's
yeah,
I just hope that people can, because like if there's one thing I am certain about, it's the code I'm pushing out to users. So I am 101. Like some of the arguments that Bubbleman made along the way was that like stable is such a huge code base and it's spaghetti code, or I don't know if he used that specific terminology. A lot of the community seems to like it, um, but it could have been an unrelated change that somehow affected input. But that's not how it works. That's not how we work. We have multiple review processes in place. My code is always checked by Smiggy Poo or someone else. We cannot cause an issue like that. It's just impossible.
I see. So yeah, that ended up being basically just a lot of drama over what amounted to a social media version of mass hysteria, I guess.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, that's a confusing situation to be in on either end, I suppose. But that's water under the bridge,
It was
essentially.
definitely a lesson learned.
Yeah. So let's move on.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the most recent drama. I think this was addressed in a large way last week, but just reiterating the whole bounty sheet to tournament stuff that ended up getting found by players and essentially getting complained about. Why is this like they found out it was a playtester, but why is this like tournament staff worker getting paid much more than the tourney winners, et cetera, et cetera? And what ended up happening as a result of that was you froze the tournament bounties completely for
Yep.
an indeterminate amount of time. And I'd like just to like we had this slight discussion on Twitter that you said the prize pools that was I think the main tweet or the main point of the tweet from Dust Ice was like, oh, we don't have enough prize pools if the tournament players are uh, getting paid this like quote unquote little amount, and then the tournament staff is getting paid like multiple times that. We obviously don't have enough prize pools, but then you happen to tackle the tournament bounties first. Like, what is your point on that? Because you
Mm.
ended up saying the prize pools were incorrect, where you said the prize pools might change, or that the whole tweet was inaccurate when I kind of pointed out that you didn't change the prize pools. You instead just tackled the tournament bounties by freezing them. You said that was a little bit inaccurate. What is your point on that?
One sec. Oh yeah. Okay. So the yep. Yeah, so we kind of discussed this in detail at the last community meeting. So anyone that's interested in looking into doing a deeper dive, that was like a hour and a half meeting. I don't think you've listened to that. So I think a lot of this would be answered if you listened to it rather than read the notes, because I do know a lot was missing from those notes. But anyway, I'll reiterate. So the payment that we made, which was the one that caused all this drama in the first place, was uh, paying out. It was the first one that came in for this tournament season, for this World Cup, and based on previous numbers, and I also talked with a couple of people that were involved as to figure out what hourly rates would be considered fair. Um, that was paid out for like it was something like 300 hours over multiple years, and I think that bit of detail may have been lost because it was something like $1,000. But if you divide that by 300 hours, anyway,
Yeah,
ignoring that, the payments have been frozen. for now because I kind of got a bit disheartened at the whole system, that people were, starting to expect these payments, and that's not really what the OS community, the tournament thing, the World Cups has been in the past. So I wanted to take a step back from it and just reassess things. And that's like, we're not saying we're not going to compensate people and going forward, but that's where we are right now. So in that meeting last week, and I think you may have mentioned this maybe in the next. Oh no, okay. So it was in your original Twitter post, I think, that you said I should be getting someone else to do this stuff, and that's exactly what we're doing. Chili Pair is actually going to step in and basically take over the financials and everything with the World Cup tournaments because I just don't have the time to run this stuff. And that's one of the reasons this bounty issue happened in the first place. I mean, you can check, I can find you the DM conversations before I actually awarded these bounty where I discussed wanting to actually define an hourly rate which I can use going forward to compensate people because it takes me for every World Cup. I mean, we have 4 or 5 a year, so each time going through these bounties and compensating people, I need to actually follow up with people that know how much work has been done to make sure it has actually been done and that the hours they because sometimes people state that they've done like 300 hours work for one tournament and we're
Yeah,
like that doesn't match up, and quite
yeah,
often
that
people have been overquoting, so it's a very time consuming role. And that's so this year I was like, I need to standardize these rates because we were also altering the rates based on that, right? If someone overquoted, we would pay them a lower rate because just to make things match up from our end. um, so I was trying to standardize that system, and that was the first bounty that went out. Because it got so much public attention, a lot of people that weren't asking for compensation in the past, I think, reached out for it. And we had suddenly, thousands of dollars worth of incoming requests to the point where I didn't actually have the budget assigned to this. So that rate which I gave out to that one person wouldn't have been maintainable for the rest of the work. Yeah,
makes
so that's why what we're doing going forward is kind of assigning a full budget to the tournament and leaving it up to the people in charge of the World Cups, which is going to be Chilia Pair and Leo to a lesser extent, I think, to actually create budgets and assign how much is going to be going out to the team, how much is going to be into the prize pools. As much as possible, I'm going to make myself hands off with that. I'm just going to continue to, I guess, sponsor the tournaments for the same amount. It's something like, I think I gave all the actual numbers in that meeting. So if you're interested in that, I gave the exact numbers, but I think it's something like 50,000 a year is how much we actually pay out for prize pools and everything.
so
Um,
divided that by 4 World Cups and just
yeah,
like a couple of tournament stuff payments, then you'd have a decent amount of prize pool. Yeah,
yeah, well,
but
I mean, we already have, it's about 5,000 for the OS World Cup, and I think 500 for the other ones currently is the prize pool we have. But potentially that can be increased if the division of who is getting paid. And in that meeting, we spent a lot of time, like probably the majority of the time, figuring out if we can bring in more money for this so we can increase the prize pools because uh, like I also mentioned it in that meeting, but I did some um, calculations comparing us to other larger games, which have $1 million prize pools, or at least larger than what we do.
yes.
And if you compare it to like their net worth or their yearly revenue, we're actually spending a much higher percentage than they are, which basically says that if we want bigger prize pools, maybe we need to get the users, the viewers, the participants more involved, and that's what we're going to try and do going forward. I think having more ways for people to, we have the country banners, but maybe being able to sponsor a player directly or being able to choose a higher amount than $2.50 for the country banner if they want to support at a higher level.
I see. That's honestly just the idea of having that, no longer having the bounty system for having to claim the hours you've given. Instead, have like a proper sheet of, we've put in this many hours. We have like the person supervising, like chili repair, Leo
Yeah, I
FLT,
mean,
and
the thinking was that we're not even going to do hourly. It's just going to be like a standard rate for anyone involved, just to keep things simple.
so yeah, that's honestly I think a great change, because the whole idea of having that bounty system used for what essentially was, I guess, like soft staff payments was kind of jank to begin with, I guess, which
Yeah.
I'm glad is getting moved away from. And I think that um like there were, I think, two payments done, which was, I'm not going to mention names, but it was two people. One of them was involved in World Cups for more than 1 or 2 years, and then the other one was, I think, either a new addition or 2 years.
Hmm.
Like, he was returning from 2020, and that sparked a little bit of outrage. But I think a lot of it comes down to um, essentially the difference between the community tournaments and OWC. Like, there's been a lot of players that have basically publicly spoken that they don't really bother with like small tournaments anymore. They just go for the essentially the big prizes, like Corsace, formerly Game Osu. I don't think that's continuing, or maybe it is. I'm not fully aware. Or like uh, there was like Yuki Aim, Yaz's Summer Cup, the perennial, like
Yeah.
all that was like was either sponsored or was a very high prize pool funded out of someone's goodwill. Drench program also, that was like a big one with a large prize pool.
Yeah.
And like they're starting to compare this like extreme, like the big tournaments prize pool, and comparing it to OWC, which is what I guess would be considered the biggest tournament. And they're like, this
Why
is
is the price
like,
pool lower?
yeah, why is the prize pool so much lower?
Yeah.
Which it's a point of view that you can understand, but you can also understand the point of view that, like, this is a free game with very little monetary like options. You can buy supporter, you can buy name changes, and
Yeah.
that's essentially it.
Yeah, and like I'm kind of imposing my own moral perspective on the World Cup. Potentially, from some people's point of view, I'm impeding from having a bigger prize pool because I strictly say we're not doing any sponsorships. So that's a strong opinion as well. It's a hard one.
It's a hard one. It's a contentious one, I guess. Like,
Yeah.
not everyone is gonna say, like, hey, you should actually stick sponsorless and just like fund the tournament out of the OSU revenue. But um other people will just be like, no, you need to like bring in, not gonna name company names, we need to bring in like this keyboard manufacturer, and need to bring in like this peripheral manufacturer or this monitor manufacturer, and have them increase the price pool and have this be this huge, big, flashy stuff. Which, like, I'm not sure would necessarily be a good thing. Like, it would definitely get more price pool, but would it really like be the best thing for a game that's, I don't want to say like kind of niche, but it's like a little bit underground? Would it really be the best thing to like bring in all these like sponsors and stuff? Like, I respect your vision, and I respect a lot of the like no sponsor, everything having to be like really open. I respect how you're doing like a lot of the dev stuff and funding a lot of the tournament stuff by yourself, and having a lot of like, I guess, personal association with the game.
Yeah.
And it's a good, and it's also like, I think even the people who want the sponsors on OWC or on other official tournaments can kind of respect that point of view, and if not agree with it, then at least understand it from that perspective.
Yeah. I mean, from our end, so basically everyone on the team and also I think the World Cup tournament team, we've agreed that from a user's perspective, the World Cup is seen as the primary tournament, the one to look up to, right? So
Yes.
our plan going forward, and I agree with that. We need to keep it that way, or try our best to strive for that. My personal opinion is that I am very happy for community tournaments to take over, to have bigger prize pools than us, to do the sponsorship thing. I have nothing against that, and I'm very glad they're doing it. I'm super happy to see these other tournaments take off and do so well. But at the same time, we do want to, from a management perspective, we want to do everything the best we can. So that's why we're getting why I'm getting Chilia Pair involved. That's the direction everyone's agreed on, and I think things are going to improve there for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a great change. Uh, Moving on a little bit, still talking about like the, I guess, immediate fallout of that, or
Yeah,
like at least very direct consequence of it. The tournament customs, which I've seen a little bit of misunderstanding from your part. You're calling not them necessarily being custom maps, but them being commission maps, and that's kind of created the whole drama in and of itself.
hmm.
But essentially, the tournament, like the maps made specifically for tournaments, for the big tournaments, let's say OWC, like Corsairs, or other tournaments that like have this kind of prestige associated with it. They got brought up in the latest community talk, for all I'm aware of, and they've essentially been given sort of a green light to seek out a little bit more recognition somehow by either getting a tag or by having an easier time getting ranked or whatever. And uh, essentially, after that meeting, like everyone was looking forward to it. Everyone was like kind of happy or at least placated in a way.
Yeah,
And then I believe they opened up a post on GitHub to actually like confirm those changes and see what they could do. And then there was a little bit of resistance initially from your end and from other people, and essentially it ended up kind of ending up in limbo,
yep.
where we don't really know what to do now because we don't have a category, we don't have a tag, we don't have like anywhere to actually put those without disturbing some other system or without disturbing something else.
Yeah.
And what
So
actually,
So behind the scenes, this is still in discussion. There's a couple of things. First of all, the pushback in that GitHub thread is because what we agreed on in the meeting last week was having a custom um, a flag on the map, something similar to the featured artist
yes,
label, just to mark these maps, showing that they were used in one of the high end tournaments. Um, and I'm completely fine with that. The extra part was that uh, suddenly I was told that they need leaderboards and that they need a new category. They can't be in loved, which is the current, the catch-all, I guess, edge case for where things can't be ranked, but they still want to get a leaderboard. They can't be in love, so we need to make a new category. Making a new category is a huge thing to me. Not only does it mean we're going to have, I mean, to a certain extent, just having a label itself is going to create a new process. Whereas, like, which maps actually qualify for this? Who is going to manage that system? It's going to have all these new criteria come into place. There's a bit of overhead there, but adding leaderboards is something I would definitely not be doing. If they're not going in loved, then they're not getting leaderboards. And the reasoning for that is because uh, the OS systems we have are very complicated. And we already have a lot of weird categories and like approved, which is no longer used. But like ephemeral at one point in that conversation says, "Let's just use approved," and that's like that breaks my mind because we finally got rid of it and we're trying to bring it back. One of the things I'm trying to do with laser and just with the forward development of OS is to simplify and to cut back on the things which are really complicating the system. Because from a user's perspective, I think Oz is like so convoluted as a system, as a community. There's so many different facets in it. Adding one more category, which is only going to contain these very limited tournament maps, just feels like a very bad direction to go.
It makes some sense. It also, I'm not discounting ephemeral suggestion here because initially, for the people who aren't really aware of, approved was kind of used for the maps that broke the score ranking. So like maps that were too big of a total score for FC or stuff, like they would were put in approved to not matter for score ranking.
Well, originally it
And
was
then
actually used similar to Loved. It was just things that people liked
that, that
way
yeah,
back in the
no, that's
day.
true.
The
Wasn't
original
like
purpose.
wasn't your map the first approved map, like the Resegun?
Maybe. Was
I
it?
don't
I think
actually
that's
remember.
ranked. That has to be ranked.
Let's look.
No way. But yeah, anyway, so the pushback and the remaining what's leaving this in limbo is the figuring out how to potentially get these into the love category, which is what I think both Ephemeral and I agree has to be the way forward. And there is ongoing discussion there, so it's not in limbo. I think there is still promise that we can make this work because as far as I can see, the whole the idea of the love system being maps that people want to see, you know, have a
That makes
permanent
sense. Yeah.
home.
It's just that the I think the loved pushback kind of it goes something like this. Like the loved maps have to be like popular. They have to be community, like I guess loved in quotes, and they have to be like quality. And I guess only one of those things is actually like ensured with tournament maps. Like their tournament maps aren't necessarily like popular maps as much as your standard like jump practice or like dump map for Mania. They're
Yeah.
not necessarily like super loved. Sometimes the tournament maps are a little bit hated. In fact, for a couple of the players that
Mm.
play them, like I guess that's kind of where the pushback is coming from. Like, is loved really the place for this? Like, can you really say, oh, this map is loved? Like, it is loved by the community, is loved
Yeah.
enough to put the
Yeah, I
label
think I
loved
think
on it.
from that angle, I think it definitely deserves further discussion then because if the maps aren't loved, if they're like uh not calling out these mappers or anything, but if they're shitty maps, then maybe they don't deserve to have a special a special place or a special label, you know?
I guess.
I don't know. I don't think just because someone makes a map specifically for a tournament, they immediately deserve some special labeling, some exemplary treatment of their map. I don't think that goes hand in hand. I think it still needs to meet a certain quality standard, and hopefully we can work with the loved team to bridge this gap and maybe create a path where these maps can have an entry to the loved system.
All right. Also, just clearing up the stuff I said before. Your map is approved. It is
Okay.
uh, the third approved map. The first one
Yeah.
was Paramax, that
Right. So
marathons.
yeah, it must have been what we used also for marathons. I think it was anything which didn't have the classic difficulty spread back then.
Yeah, they weren't required for spread, which I guess it makes sense for tournament customs to kind of like seek that because they're essentially one difficulty
Yeah.
for both of them. So, but like that suggestion isn't out of like reason or anything. It's just approved as a dead category for all intents and purposes. It doesn't even show up in the new website.
Yeah.
So yeah,
But yeah, I definitely think that this isn't in limbo. It's ongoing, and I mean, if you read through that GitHub thread, hopefully my opinions on it. What I've been talking about here, that I kind of try my best to explain that, but yeah, it's, there's a lot of subjective or very
Self
heated
opinionated
opinions.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I definitely think it needs further discussion, because so the main thing is that I want to say here is that we discussed this in the meeting, but what was posted to GitHub, what we actually saw here was different from what was decided. So it's not like it's not like I suddenly went back on something I agreed with. It's that what was proposed here was actually different to what we agreed on.
I see. So yeah, I think that's a good enough answer. I think at least if someone's not satisfied with that, they can at least like contribute to the discussion in GitHub and like know that the developer himself said, "Hey, this is not in limbo. We're working on this. We're seeing
Yeah.
what we can do for the love category and for anything else."
And I'll add that
So,
Ephemeral said that this is currently in discussion in the Loved channel. So if you look on the dev Discord in the os-love channel, there is ongoing discussion on this for anyone interested.
all right, that's great to know. So if you're listening to the call right now, or if you're on Twitch, you can just go to the Osolove uh, section under community on the Yosodev Discord, and after verifying, you can even add your 2 cents there if you desire. Just so if anyone is willing to do that or wanting to.
Yep.
So let's move on to the next one, which is this essentially happened. I think. Let's see what the date was. It was also like earlier this year. Earlier this year is just a gold mine, I guess. But essentially, the the idea was that you asked a lot of active modders and mappers to try out the laser editor and then have some sort of feedback as to what is missing, what is an issue, what is potentially like not working as intended.
Yeah.
But for people that actually like use the editor on stable on the daily, so they can like really point out the big stuff. And then I believe a user. This was pointed out to me by the user, so this might be a little bit biased, of course. But the user made this like whole forum post about stuff that was missing, and then they were told to post that on GitHub. And
Hmm.
then like you specifically said, hey, this usually everyone has to post like specific issues, not compile them into a single GitHub post. That's not how that platform works. But there's an exception that I might make for this specific like catch-all editor issues that was posted on this forum thread. And then they made that GitHub post, and then um, you either forgot about that exception or you just didn't want to deal with it on that way, so you just said, hey, can you please make this into isolated posts, which it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, especially the people who were actively like relying on that post to kind of relay their frustrations with the laser editor and relay like what was wrong with it. So that ended up kind of discouraging a lot of people from posting their issues, because like what's gonna happen, what like is he just gonna tell me to post the issue fragmented even more? Is it just gonna take me this whole amount of time to just essentially accomplish nothing? So what was your point of view on that? Because you might have just like forgotten about the exception. You might have just like you might have just not been able to deal with it on one post. So to just like fragment it, what happened there?
Yeah. So I don't actually understand what this is talking about, because so I'll just read my reply to them. Um, there was never any dismissal of this post. It's still open. It's still being tracked. It's 10 out of 22 tasks done. I'm sure more of them have been done. My reply was, in general, I recommend you try and split these issues up into more individual reports over time, following the template and providing screenshots showing what you mean, as your single sentences are not explaining enough for us to take action in several cases. And what I meant there was that in their original post, they posted sentences which, in some cases, we couldn't understand what they were actually asking for. So for the ones I could understand, I actually went through and I wrote up each issue myself. I didn't even expect them to do it. I did it myself. Um, and I'm not sure about the rest. There's some which I would need to look through this list again. I haven't looked at this issue for a while.
I see.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, there was you mentioned some exception to the rule. Maybe I told them to post on GitHub in one post, and yeah, like my response was basically that we can't understand your post, so please split it out. But at the same time, I split it out for them, so it's not like I was looking for them to do it for me. I did it where I could, and that's what
I
we
see.
do. We do our best to fix these issues for users when they report actual valid issues. And since then, we've actually switched the way we do GitHub. Uh, we users now post to the discussions, which is like a different area, and they can post whatever the fuck they want. We actually write the issues up for them. So we no longer expect a user to do this. If they post them all these kinds of issues in a single post, they're free to do that. We'll fix it for them.
Ah, that's something I actually didn't know. Like,
Yeah.
this isn't like it kind of like brings up to a point that I was gonna mention later, but this is essentially a really foreign platform for a lot of people. Like, not everyone is like familiar with the GitHub interface. Not everyone's familiar with how like GitHub works.
Yeah.
And like, you can post in discussions, you can post in issues, you can like do your own like, I guess you can do your own coding on pull requests. It's something I'm not like even particularly um versed in,
Hmm.
but you can like do your own like limited coding and then like, hey, can you add this on pull requests? I believe
Yeah,
that's
yeah, it's a heavily um developer
centric, I
first,
guess.
yeah, developer
Yeah,
centric platform, but that's one of the reasons why we actually do things there. It's because it does create a certain bar of entry, and that's not to like be like dismissing user opinions or um you know walling them out or anything. It's that the community is so big and everyone is saying like the same request, whether it's a bug or a feature request. It's not just one person that has that unique idea. There's like multiple people, and what we rely on these days is the filtering of those reports up to GitHub, because we just can't track everything. Like I try and keep up with the forums as well, but there's so much noise, and having everything on GitHub gives us one place, one notification stream where all the team members are watching. If I was to make a call that another Smoogie or someone doesn't agree with, they'll call me out on it. If I delete something and Smoogie doesn't agree, he'll fucking grill me on it. So that it's an upgrade in transparency, and it just means that we um, have a set workflow. We are able to track these tasks in a way that we can actually progress forward efficiently.
I see. So it's just more practical, like, than just
Yeah, yeah,
powering
and
through the
and I
forums,
mean,
which is
yeah, I know you brought this up later in your talking points, but I did a few times on Twitter and stuff be like, please report this on GitHub to users, and people got really offended by that, being like, why are you telling me to report on this foreign platform I've never interacted with? It's so intimidating to me. Go away. I dislike um
I
what you
dislike change.
yeah, so I acknowledge that, and these days, like, I ask people to report on GitHub, or if they're not happy with that, they can email me or use the forums. We give them that option. I always make sure to disclaim that these days, because otherwise I know someone's going to reply being like, "No, it's Peppy telling people to post on GitHub again."
Yeah, I can assure you that a lot of the, at least from the circles I'm a part of in like mapping and tournament and whatever, when they're asked to post an issue on GitHub that they've like already pointed out on like whatever Reddit or
Yep.
Twitter or whatever.
Yeah,
They
no
just
doubt.
they've already like written up this essay and then it's like please post on GitHub. You're just like a little bit miffed.
Yeah.
Like you're just look. I just did that whole effort and then I have to post it again on the platform I don't even understand. It's really a little bit disheartening, but it makes sense. It makes sense that GitHub is the platform, especially for a project that's still very much in flux like Laser.
Yep.
Like it's
And keep
very
this in mind.
important.
If I tell someone to post something on GitHub, on Twitter or something, that's not me dismissing it, saying this is actually important. You should be we need to document this on GitHub. If it's important enough, I will do it myself. But if it's something like nuanced and opinionated or something, then I think it's more up to the user to report that, because I probably wouldn't give them uh, a fair description, a fair translation of what they actually want to say, and they'd probably follow up with being like, "That's not what I meant" or something. But yeah, it's not. It's us saying that we want to actually track these tasks, not anything else.
I see.
And
But yeah,
if you're intimidated by GitHub, I'd suggest like taking a look around, because it's nothing more than a forum. It's not
yeah,
that
it's
hard.
a fancy forum. Like I've been using GitHub. Sorry, I've been using GitHub for what amounts to like half a year at this point,
Yeah,
and well, it's daunting at first because a lot of the terminology is different. It's not like create a thread, create a make a tweet, make a post. No, it's more like a hey, make an issue or discussions, and there's a
yeah.
lot of like kind of not hidden, but it's a lot of a little bit trickier to navigate UI than you maybe would find on a like user first kind of
Yeah,
website.
I think after when we get further into the development cycle, if we do choose to like use GitHub primarily, like we have the feature request forum, which I don't look at because it has like 10,000. It has every suggestion that could be suggested under the sun already suggested there,
Yeah,
and we already have probably implemented thousands of those in Laser with our ongoing development. Um, when we actually Laser becomes the mainstream, it's actually pushed as an update to stable. We'll probably either give more visibility to the GitHub discussions page so people can actually get there, because the discussions is a really user-friendly interface. It's meant to be more for end users. It has upvoting, it has standard threaded conversations and stuff.
reactions, etc. Yeah,
So we'll either give that more visibility, or we'll switch back to the forums. We'll clean out the forum and go back to using that. Um, we're not at that point yet. We're so backlogged in tasks to get things up to speed that we don't really need those kinds of suggestions. So it's more about bug reports and such, or ongoing discussions about the kinds of issues you've brought up in this conversation, the community stuff.
let's see.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's a good point. Like I think the whole GitHub thing, I very much villainized it way too much. Like from the end point of hey, I'm someone who's not involved in GitHub and I'm forced to onto this platform, and I've heard this multiple times where like everyone is like, why do I have to go to this platform when there's a perfectly good website and forums that I can go to, and I'm being told to go here, and it's this whole mess. But it's a it's very useful. It's a useful platform for development. It's a useful platform for kind of filtering out that noise that you said. Like even though it might filter out a little bit of the people who aren't willing to do that extra effort to put it on GitHub, it might also just give a lot more clarity to the issues that are actually important so that you actually have to go on GitHub and like post it yourself, or even just like post it on discussions and have it posted for you.
Yeah, I mean,
So
all we can do at the end of the day is we have limited time, we have limited manpower, so it's all about creating a flow that we can keep up with, and we struggle to keep up with GitHub as it is. There's just so much activity there from users that we are at almost the breaking point. So it's working well for us. It's filtering issues down, hopefully the issues that matter to our eyes. And I don't think we're going to be changing that process.
I see.
So yeah, I don't think GitHub should be intimidating to users that are actually looking to report issues correctly to actually help us help them.
All right. I think that's perfectly reasonable, and I think anyone who understands a little bit of development can agree. So, just moving on to, I guess, much less coding and much less like bugs or laser or anything like that. This was a community interaction that sparked a lot of drama, a lot of memes, a lot of kind of negative reactions, but also like just take a look at this guy, where there was a tweet that essentially said this background is no longer appropriate for some reason, and then they posted the background because it got like held up by a GMT or something,
Yeah.
and you replied to that tweet with a very funny, I guess, quip, which was just, well, I could fap to this.
Yep.
And do you want to give your 2 cents on the matter there?
First of all, I I I absolutely love that this has become a meme. I really I like that quote for myself. But yeah, so I think a lot of people did understand that what I was doing there is it was a joke. It was a sarcastic joke. But I do also know my sarcasm can be quite subtle. Um, that background apparently it was like potentially an underage anime character. I don't know what it was. I wasn't really looking at the background. I was just replying, basically saying that it's very hard to define what is valid and what is invalid in terms of safe work content, or how to actually enforce these kinds of policies into the community in a way that everyone can agree with, because there's going to be someone that can fap to anything. It could have been a fucking snail on the ground, and I would have said I'd fap to that. So it wasn't about the image content to me. It was about the fact that it's very hard to police this content in a way that pleases everyone. Luckily, I think after that discussion, like we have a pretty good policy in place, and we haven't hit any major road bumps since then. So yeah, it's worked, but I don't know. Does that answer your question? Do you? I can go into it further if you want.
Um, my phone is ringing. I hate this. I hate this so much.
Do you need to answer
Um,
it?
no, it's fine. Um, I think that answers it. Like, it's obviously like a quip that wasn't meant to be taken seriously, but people were just like a little bit outraged at how the background itself would spark concerns of like, oh, this is overly sexualized, or oh, this is not acceptable for our youth.
Yeah, yeah,
And that quip just kind of like, as much as it was sarcastic, it also made people like upset because it was kind of like jokingly justifying it, which for Twitter especially, Twitter is not the medium where something like that can be interpreted right and
yeah,
not
yeah.
like.
No, no. I mean, I know I was completely in the wrong there. That's why I pulled the tweet, because I thought it was funny, but there's obviously people that don't agree with that. And especially if you're coming to that tweet, not knowing the context behind it, because it was a very nuanced conversation, right? This was ongoing discussions about content moderation. Uh, if you didn't have that context, what I was saying there was probably very weird, to say the
Yeah,
least. So
no, it,
yeah, no,
I had a laugh. I had a laugh when that happened. It wasn't a laugh where it was like, hey, Peppy's such a fool. Like, how would he say this? He's stupid. No, it was more of a laugh as like, hey, this is like a kind of shit situation, and then that tweet is just like it's just it's kind of like a little bit of nihilistic humor where like wow it's a little bit it's a little bit nonsensical, but also it makes enough sense to actually be humorous. I don't know.
Yeah,
Explaining a good joke is quite hard, I
yeah.
guess.
But I mean, I said publicly that it was out of line. I don't know. I there's a lot of things which I probably shouldn't say, and as you've mentioned in your original and probably in this document too, like ephemeral is like on cleanup duty after I say anything. But that's not going to change unfortunately because I like speaking my mind.
Yeah. No.
But on that particular
You've always
instance,
been that kind of guy where you like speaking your mind, and that sometimes rubs some people the wrong way.
yep, and that's fine. I
And,
mean, you can't please everyone, and I do know there's people that are want to make sure that like I don't change how I interact with the community. Like it would be very easy for me to be like pull all my personal opinions and just have someone else, vet my tweets and post them out. That's probably what most companies do. But I don't think that's cool. I don't think that's how I want to run my Twitter account or us. It's like
all right. So
even like yesterday, I posted a tweet about the Mania long nose. I'm not sure if you saw that, but it was like, yeah, this is. I was curious because someone mentioned to me on Twitter that the long note judgments on laser are slightly different to stable, and yeah, they may be, but also at the same time they mentioned that long notes just don't having the release timings doesn't feel good. So I was like, let's see what people think. I was like, this is just for personal opinion. This is not going to change anything in the game. As in, nothing is going to change from this tweet. And oh my god, I think I started World War III with that tweet, with people being like, you shouldn't be posting this on the official PR of your game. If it's a personal opinion, make your own private account. It's like, dude, this is my personal account. If you want the official one, go to fucking Ozgame Twitter.
Oz game, Oz status,
Yeah. But I mean,
stuff like that.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, but that I don't think anyone still like takes that seriously. I think everyone just kind of refers to the well, I could faff to this phrase as kind of a meme,
Yeah.
and it's good to stay that way
I hope I
because
didn't offend anyone with it. I mean, I probably did. It's very hard not to offend people these days, but that wasn't the intent. It was intended to just be a funny quip in an ongoing debate. Because that was a very split. Even inside the team, we had a very strong split on how we should be handling this. So I just wanted to breathe a bit of humor into it.
all right. So for these last two issues, which this has been going on for quite a while, but it's almost at the end. So if you're getting bored, just be at least a little bit assured on that. For
Almost
the
it.
last two issues, we're going to have a short view back to the past, where these aren't necessarily like recent issues, but they're issues that have like sparked a lot of controversy like previously, where one of them was the whole gamma debacle. Uh I kind of touched on that. I think a lot of people had had this notion that I was putting that gamma abuse like issue as the main center point because I just happened to mention it first. No,
Hmm.
but essentially there was this whole period where the reinforced opinion, even by yourself, was that gamma and like altering gamma, abusing gamma was a bannable offense. And then what happened is some people got banned by gamma, but a somewhat like a person that wasn't famous but was a part of a community of people that were kind of like in niche but like famous in that kind of area got banned by using gamma or for using gamma,
Yeah.
and then they it kind of stirred up this whole controversy, and then the gamma like debate was kind of settled in that you said, okay, now if you use gamma, if you just alter your gamma specifically, you can't get banned for it. What happened there? What changed in that kind of perspective?
So
And
yeah, so at a point in the past, gamma was actually used as an exploit for flashlight. This was back in probably 2015. I think it was before this, because this is like 2017, right?
yeah,
When
this
this,
is 2017.
yeah. So way might have not have been 2015, 2014, somewhere around that time. It was actually possible to use gamma to see more in flashlight. And that was because the gradient of flashlight was more, um, the easing on it was different to what we have these days. So even though it looked like it was almost black, there was actually a fallout of the blackness. And if you adjusted your gamma, you would actually get about 20, 30, 40% extra viewing area. So that's where the whole banning from gamma thing came from. We used to actually ban for it. I think in 2017, this case, I don't actually see. I don't have context on this. Like looking at the Reddit thread you linked, it looks like it was me unbanning a ban that was applied potentially incorrectly, or potentially I don't know if the ban was actually for gamma itself. But I can say at
Um,
that point that I don't think we were actively banning for it. It may have been an
yeah.
incorrectly applied one.
What I remember from this was that the person was essentially like they used gamma for higher approach rates because there's some merit to that where the approach circle apparently like is more noticeable faster. It's something that people that actually use gamma, I don't, but people that actually use gamma can like attest to and even swear by.
Mm.
And that person like made sure that they went out of their way to claim that they used gamma. They were like, hey, I'm using gamma, what are you going to do about it? I'm using gamma to play these maps, and what are you going to do about it? And then they got banned. I don't know if it was directly by a member of staff or if it was right reports or something like that, but it was like very clear that I'm using gamma, I'm using gamma, I dare you to ban me. And then they got banned, and that's how that whole kind of thread started, where hey, they're using gamma, a lot of people use gamma, it's just a monitor setting, etc., etc. And that you essentially came into the thread and cleared that up. But yeah, I think a lot of people don't remember the flashlight abuse that you could do with gamma. It wasn't even like from my time. I only started those a little bit later,
Yeah.
but I remember that people would say that once, as kind of like a joke, there was like this whole, if you used gamma, you could see like a very clear like fuck you or something like that, where
Yep.
it was placed there just to like discourage people from
Yeah, yeah,
actually
on
using
the edge
that.
of the spinner. No, it wasn't on the. It was on the edge of flashlight. We made the flashlight texture spin really fast, and it said "cheating fuck" on it. So if you put your gamma high enough, you could see that. It was a good way to discourage it because you didn't want this huge spinning thing around your screen when you were trying to focus on the game.
Yeah,
So I think it worked quite well. We took that out at some point. I think probably
yeah,
when we.
and I don't think flashlight has any sort of gamma exploit anymore.
No.
So yeah, you can't. If you wanted to see cheating fuck spinning at high speeds, then you can't anymore. But you can probably find a video of it somewhere. But yeah, that's that whole like really old drama at this point, where it's almost been like it's almost been, I want to say, four, maybe maybe 5 years. I don't remember. I think it was four. But there will be a mention to something older a little bit at the end here. But essentially, this is, I believe, from 2019, where there was this whole like, this is nothing that I like to touch upon too much, because you know this is this was by someone who was very clearly and publicly involved with cheating software, and I don't want to like give publicity to that, but essentially there was a thread where it was like Osu anti cheat, and like a funny meme of like a fence that was like in the middle of a path, and then there was just grass on the outside of the path
Mm-hmm.
where there was no fence. And you clarified, can even go to the full context here. You clarified that you saw that was a meme, but that essentially you tried to put some sort of anti cheat, and then someone stole and released the source code, and then when that happened, you just decided, okay, no more anti cheat, no more anything. Let's just rely on community reports and rely on community investigation to actually do some sort of cheating monitoring. And then this person comes and says, "What about the anti cheat that I literally offered to you?" This person was like very publicly involved with just the one of the most famous kind of cheating softwares. And then you essentially replied with something that for a lot of people kind of came across as very clueless, I guess, which was, is it open source under a permissive license? Which for a lot of people who are familiar with anti-cheats from other games, being having an anti-cheat be open source kind of defeats the purpose of the
Yeah, it
anti-cheat.
does,
And
doesn't
even
it?
you can even like refer back to the original post where, oh, someone stole and released the source code for the anti-cheat, so we just said, what's the point?
Yeah.
And that kind of happened as a discussion. And I remember like people kind of mocking that as, Peppy doesn't know anything about anti-cheats, this game will never be clean,
Mm-hmm.
active cheaters in the top 100, you really think it'll happen? And that whole debacle actually sparked discussion over the better part of a year that kind of ended, I'd say, with the Hall of Shame, which was that whole like, you monitored over a space of like 2 3 months for something, and you banned like close to 100 people, which close to 100 people in the top 10,000, or yeah, 10,000, right? Which
Yeah.
was very public, and it sparked a lot of controversy because even like famous people were banned. Like one person was allegedly reformed, who was top like 20, and that was the whole thing. But what do you want to like explain a little bit of what happened with that anti cheat before,
Yeah.
or what happened to deny that anti cheat? What were your thoughts on that kind of um like, I wouldn't say cheating scene, but like the cheating stuff that's I don't say it's still happening, because you know there's people that say it's worse, there's people that say it's better. you know Everyone has kind of a different opinion on that. But what is your like stance on anti cheats and cheating in general right now?
Yeah. So there's a lot I can go through with this one. So where to start? First of all, you mentioned that the source code got stolen. So yeah, we had one of the developers on our team, their GitHub got compromised, and the full source to the game was leaked. Uh, and yeah, at that point, I removed quite a bit of the anti-cheat measures we had in place. Some of those were actually not all of them removed. I never said fuck it, let's remove everything. So I think that may have been lost in translation somewhere along the way. I mean, all this stuff is obviously, as you said, private, so we wouldn't be telling people that we removed it all anyway. But the stuff we did remove was what people pointed out as a potential privacy concern from a user's perspective. And to an extent, I agreed with that. Obviously, it gave us the upper hand over cheaters in the past, and it was a pretty flawless system. But given the way privacy concerns have shifted over the years, it wasn't a good idea, in my opinion, to keep that in there. So that's what we removed. It doesn't mean we stopped working on anti-cheat. We always had it going in the background. That's how the Hall of Shame happened. It's because we monitored over a longer period of time. Obviously, we do bans in waves. That one we did make public. I don't think we're going to be doing that again because it just felt like a very negative thing to do. I wanted to try it once because other games were doing similar things, and yeah, it didn't. I think the whole team agreed that it's not the direction we want to go do. the direction we want to announce these cheaters going forward.
Yeah,
Um,
it
uh,
essentially gave cheaters attention, which you
yeah,
know,
but not only that, a lot of them were like trying to say they didn't cheat. It was just a very cringe, not cringe, or I don't know, a very negative way to spin it. I don't want to tweet that kind of stuff in the future. Is basically what I'm saying.
yeah, I understand.
So and then the my response about so you mentioned the person who was actually a cheat developer who offered us an anti-cheat. I hope you can see the conflict of interest there without me saying it. Like someone that's actually providing the cheats, also providing the thing to stop their cheats or potentially everyone's cheats but their cheats. I will preface that they publicly said that they were making more revenue than us from selling cheats for us. And so let that sink in for a moment. And that was at the time they offered the anti cheat, I'm pretty sure. So
Yeah,
that they're
so
actually making more
probably
money
wouldn't.
than the game is making from selling cheats, which are destroying the game. And then they come to us and offer us a solution. Does that not feel a bit
It,
weird?
it does feel weird, and it probably would have like implied that they would have tried to put in some sort of backdoor that they
Yeah,
could
no
exploit.
doubt. No doubt
Yeah.
they had I mean maybe they had good intentions. It's impossible to say and I don't want to put words in their mouth because that same person has come forward multiple times since then and helped tried to contribute to the project. So, maybe at that point they had a change of heart or something. That's not of concern here. What is of concern is my reply to that on Reddit. I said only if it's under an open source license, and you said, well, that doesn't make any sense. Yeah, why do you think I said that? Maybe it's because I was being dismissive. I didn't want anything to do with that.
Oh,
It was just another witty reply I had.
that that
It's
that
it
one was when you said your sarcasm was subtle,
yeah.
then that one was one that I never really understood were sarcastic,
Yeah.
which made me a little bit. It made me realize now that yeah, it's quite subtle sometimes.
Yeah, so hopefully the extra context like kind of I don't like to reveal all my secrets, all my the humor hidden in my replies, but that's where that one came from. Obviously, we would never open source an anti-cheat because it's not sustainable. It's not possible.
I see. So yeah, that's something that it's something that I've always been curious ever since the Hall of Shame is how was your like actual relationship with anti cheats after what happened with the leaked source code and that whole like oh Osu's taking a screenshot of your desktop or whatever
Yep.
that happened
Hmm.
straight afterwards. So that's really nice to know, and that's also nice to know that there was never like just complete abandonment of the anti cheat measures that were just the removal of that like privacy related concern.
Yeah.
So those are all the incidents that we've listed here on the document.
Hmm.
So I think all of them either have some sort of good conclusion or like at least a very justified or understandable point of view coming out from the other side that the community doesn't really see. What I want to talk about just to like kind of finish this talk is that I kind of touched on this in the tweet longer a little bit, which was the community at large. I think if they've been around for long enough, they've kind of had this one big project kind of hammered into their expectations as that will fix it, that will fix stuff, that will make everything better, that will be the next big thing.
Yep.
Like people, I got a mention from Blue Dragon, now known as Miss Magius, and they basically said, "Hey, like before Laser, before OSNext, which I think is the website now, right? OSNext is kind of like evolved
Yeah,
into the
it
website.
was the design language we use for
Yeah.
website and laser.
Um, before OSHU or okay." before laser, before OS next, there was OSZ2, which was um the future kind of mapping, or not mapping, but like the beat map format for OS.
Yeah.
So that will, he kind of mentioned like some of the quotes of like 10, 11 years ago, where like, don't do this because OSZ2 is going to make it impossible, or OSZ2 will fix this, OSZ2 will fix that.
Yep.
And you can just kind of substitute some of the quotes there, some of the OSZ2s with laser right now, and it kind of fills in the same kind of, this is this one magic project which is going to fix everything. So eventually, like, if you've been exposed to that long enough, it kind of gives you a feeling of cynicism. Like,
Yeah.
it makes you feel like, oh, whatever, like, this is never going to come out, or
Yeah.
this is never going to happen, this is never going to fix anything, I'm just going to mind my own business from now on. Like, what are your thoughts on, the whole community, like, apathy at laser at some points? Like, obviously not everyone is um is overly cynical about laser. There's people that are much more than others. Like, some people are actively hoping, or not hoping, but actively expecting laser to fail. Some people are like very, very hopeful. Some
Mm.
people are expecting laser to basically make Osu into the next big game, the next big rhythm game. I've seen both opinions.
Yep.
And like, what are your opinions on that kind of like the waiting game the community has to play for the for laser was the last like 6 7 years for.
Hold on there. Laser wasn't even the word didn't exist 6 or 7 years ago, so it's only been 5 years.
Okay, okay.
There's and development on the current version only started 4 years ago. So get because I noticed in the original tweet long you mentioned like 2 Olympic cycles, and that's taking things. People keep misquoting the numbers, and it's not just it's a common thing to do. Like I've seen it happen with other games as well, like Star Citizen, when
Yeah,
people have been like, "This has been in development for 20 years," and you look and it
I
wasn't.
think I kind of got educated on this afterwards,
Yeah.
but I thought Osu Next at some point was like just the previous name for Oslaser, and then I realized no, Osu Next was a completely different thing
Well,
that's
yeah,
already
us
kind of
next was
out.
just a it was a design thing that our designer did before we actually had any code in place. It was just like let's make a cool prototype of what Oz could look like in the future.
I see. But what are your thoughts on that whole like the waiting game the community has
Yeah,
to play?
yeah.
Like, I
So
know laser is like a big project, and I
mm,
know laser is, it's kind of already out. Like, you can download it, you can mess around with it, you
yeah,
have playable, very playable, in fact, gameplay, and there's a lot of things still missing, but a lot of things that are added on, and like new things that you can explore. But what are your thoughts on like that whole cynicism that people can start having, and like stuff like that, where laser has to be, basically Jesus Christ incarnate to actually like meet expectations essentially at this point?
yeah. So let's there's a bit to unpack there. Let's start from the beginning. So the OSZ2 stuff. I looked through the link that you had that you provided, which is like search results from my forum post where I've replied being like this will be fixed in OSZ2. So OSZ2 is like a file format update for the OSZ, the bitmap file format. And the interesting part about reading through those, this was like so long ago that I'm reading my own post being like, huh, I said that, did I? But the interesting part is that we actually use that. The bitmap submission system uses OSZ2 to this day. And a lot of the issues I mentioned there that would be fixed have been fixed. Not all of them, because we didn't actually. The original plan was to push OZ2 out as the download format as well. The only reason we haven't done that, even though OS supports it, the reason we haven't done that is because there's so many community projects that rely on the OSZ format, and we didn't want to break them. So there's like Ostroid, there's just so many that would have had to implement this new format to actually make things work. And at the end of the day, I was just like, it's not worth that extra effort. We've already implemented it for the server side. We use it for I used it for interop with OSStream, the iOS version. Anytime we've done some new stuff with OSZ files, it's usually been using OSZ 2 because it gives us a more efficient way of dealing with files. Um, but yeah, that's just something I wanted to clear up there. Obviously, it's not really visible in a user's eyes, but internally it is being used. So it's just an interesting thing to note there. But yeah, the waiting game, it's a hard one because as I kind of touched on before, everyone in the OS community has different things they're looking for. And every person like Blue Dragon, he probably has some issues which haven't been addressed since 2010. And he's, lost hope that they're ever going to be addressed. And, there's always going to be those kinds of issues. It's just, it's a time problem. We can't, as much as we'd like to, we can't address every concern that every user has. So we need to prioritize based on what we feel is important, what is upvoted most by the community. um so yeah, I mean, I can understand the cynicism, and I think it is warranted, but you're going to get that no matter what game, no matter what product, what application. It's just always going to be the case. We do our best to address user concerns. The waiting game with laser, all I can say is we're getting there. It's been a huge effort. It's been more than I expected it to be in terms of the time requirements, and that is mostly because we've been doing everything um, to the highest standard we can, making sure that we don't corner ourselves. Uh, in like our main concerns are that we want to be able to keep us running, keep uh, development going in at the same insane rate we are currently achieving with laser, going forward into like the next decade or more, as more people come on and contribute, as it becomes the main client. We don't we want to write things in a way that we don't screw ourselves over, and that takes extra effort. It requires review processes in place. It requires thinking into the future, making sure we consider everything. And we've been able to do that because the stable client is so stable, and the community, we have pushed updates for stable. Maybe not, maybe definitely not as much as I would have liked to, and definitely not as much as people that are very cynical of our development cycle uh, would be satisfied with. But the game still runs. It still runs fine. The community is still thriving on that current version, and it means it's bought us the time to be able to, develop laser in parallel and develop with all this new stuff, all these considerations in place that will allow us to continue development of the game. Whereas if we tried to do the same thing on stable, on the old code base, we definitely would have, if we were actually able to make things work, we wouldn't be happy as developers. And primarily, if we're not happy as developers, we're not going to be as efficient or as productive as we could be. So yeah, I don't know. That's a very long-winded response, and um, well, yeah, I mean, we're
Yeah,
very close
no,
to the end,
it's
I think.
it's very understandable that, especially on the side of someone who's been working on laser for what you said 5 years,
Yeah,
and you've been working on that, and to see that kind of like cynicism when you've been essentially working your ass off on, it's not a brand new game, but it's essentially like a complete rewrite, and like to like allow all these sorts of different things where the scope is big, but the results would likely be like really just much greater than what you could achieve with stable. And um it must be frustrating on your part as well to have that kind of cynicism when you've been essentially dedicating the last the last 5 years to a project that, you know, there's not much rewards to reap right now,
Mm.
but soon in the future. And as you said, like stable is, well, it's stable. It's like it's not like a different game where you need to constantly put out developer side updates to keep it fresh. The content that keeps it fresh is community. Like it's made from the community. It's maps. It's, you know, um, fun little like game modes or whatever, like funny little editor stuff that you can do, like Aspire, or like all the storyboard stuff that happened over the last couple of years. And like you don't necessarily need to push updates to stable to keep it fresh. You just need to like fix it and keep it running well. And if it wasn't for that kind of mechanic where you don't really need to keep updating it, if it wasn't for that, then laser wouldn't really be possible. You need to like keep working on stable, otherwise it would essentially become stagnant. But that's the kind of magic with Osu, is that it doesn't become stagnant because the freshness just keeps coming as a part of the cycle, the stuff that's there in place.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I will say that
And
like I don't actually feel frustration from hearing this feedback from the community. Like I don't I feel more frustration from the fact that we're not able to push this out yet. Like I because we're putting so much time into this, and I want to get it into the user's hands as soon as possible. So I feel more frustration from the fact that it's taking us this long, rather than the community saying it's taking this long. But yeah, I don't know. The other things to consider is that I am running the OS infrastructure, and over the last few years, because of COVID, we've had huge amounts of growth, and there is something to be said about the time I have to spend maintaining the existing systems. It's not all visible to the public, but I have to had to put in a lot of hours into the infrastructure, the things running all the systems that OS relies on. That's not free. So, you know, the last year or so has been very good for me in terms of how much time I can spend on laser. But before that, I was spending maybe 30-40% of my time just keeping things running. So it's not like I was putting no time into stable either. Yeah, there are other
yeah,
not so visible overheads
I
that are
see.
very, very hard to share, very hard to explain with the community. It's not something I can stream on Twitch because, as you'd expect, there's a lot of confidential information when
Yeah,
you're dealing with
very
databases and servers and stuff. But yeah,
very private stuff that you can't really.
yeah,
So even the stuff that, you know, you put a lot of hours into, you don't necessarily, because, you know, laser development, we can kind of see that the growth of laser and the how much more complete it's becoming.
mm,
But with stable, you just kind of have to like keep it running, but just the work amount required to keep it running at, you know, with good, you know, safely and well, is like big. And
yeah.
that work is completely like, um how should I say this, it's not unrewarded, because the reward is keeping that community happy and like functioning, but it's like completely unnoticed, I guess, because, you
It's
know,
not. It's
you
not
only notice when it's
unnoticed.
gone.
It's
You,
definitely not. I get so much. I get way too much. I'm humbled by the amount of feedback I get from users, which are like, thanks for making us possible, thanks for keeping it running. There's a huge amount that doesn't get seen, like emails that come into me, replies to supporter emails, people sharing their stories of how us has changed their life and everything. All the stuff you see on Twitter and stuff. There's just such a negative twist to things these days, and um, I take that with a grain of salt because I can see the other side of things from this positive response coming back to me. But yeah, I don't know.
no, it's
And the
very,
other
it's
thing
very
is,
clear.
yeah, go
It's
on.
very clear that Twitter is a very negative platform. Like it kind of
The internet
encourages.
in general, society these days, it's. Yeah, the internet is responsible for a lot of it, I guess. But
It encourages a lot of that pile on mentality where you just have very short quips and then
yeah,
you just make like, oh, this guy is stupid, this guy is whatever.
and
Meanwhile, when you have to like actually give someone a good feedback or like positive reinforcement, it has to be like this long-winded thank you for all the stuff you've done, the projects you've helped maintain, you've really changed my life, etc. That's more than it's not like 280 characters, but it's more than that. It's a platform that encourages a lot of negativity, and that's a lot of social media nowadays because outrage generates clicks, outrage generates, upvotes, I guess.
yeah, and there's just so many people these days that has I guess especially on things like Twitter where anyone can interact directly, and all these replies are seen by us. There's no filtering. There's nothing. It's a one-on-one conversation. So it's very empowering to users. But it also means that no matter like the stuff I've discussed with you today about a stable development and how I've still been putting a lot of time into it, I guarantee people are going to respond to this being like, well, you could add this one feature which is going to make my quality of life hundreds of times better in 5 minutes. Why don't you do that as well? That's true, but it's also a slippery slope where we made a decision, even though we've bypassed that decision multiple times to add quality of life things where it does make sense. We made a decision to feature lock stable so we could focus on laser, because if we don't do that, I know Smoogie and I know myself, we were tempted to put a lot more time into stable to keep up with user demands. And not only does that, take time away from our eventual goal of getting away from that old code base, but it adds um, more complexities to the existing systems, which we need to implement a second time or account for in laser. And yeah, like a lot of the things we were adding traditionally were done in maybe not the same way we would do it these days, not as well documented, not as well thought out, like hacky implementations of things, and dealing with those on, you know, when you need to consider 5-10 years into the future, you're kind of stuck with what you did back then.
Yeah,
So it's been a conscious decision, and it's kind of disappointing from our perspective as well that we can't provide more to users. But I guarantee that we're getting to a point where you're going to start seeing. I mean, just look at the laser changelogs. I challenge anyone listening to this to look back at the last 5 or 10 laser changelogs and just see how much progress we're making. And for anyone new to the community, that is the progress that we used to be doing on stable. It was like daily releases. For the first 4 or 5 years of us, I was doing daily releases with new features every day. Like one day replays would be there, next day a whole new editor test mode would be there or something. It was that rate of development, and that's what we're achieving on laser. And um, that's what's going to be the stable version soon, and I think you're going to see a lot more happening when that happens, when we get to that point. So yeah,
that's when you look at the laser change log. I'm just reading through it right now. This is 17th of December. It's like a full page of changes, and then you go back one. It's 11th of December. There's a full page of changes. Like every week, sometimes every couple of days, there's just this huge like amount of changes that it's really impressive to just keep this workflow going on throughout the
yeah,
year. Um, just very quickly, just to not have this drag on for too
yeah,
long. I
yeah,
know
yeah,
it's already
yeah, we've
hours.
hit 2 hours.
What are your thoughts on being sometimes at odds with the community when stuff like specifically gameplay oriented stuff that the community has like a view that they've kind of settled upon after a couple years, and
Yep.
then you're still like you've kind of made this game over time, and then you have this view on things and how they should be. Like, note lock was implemented based on a suggestion like 12 years ago or whatever, maybe even more, and nowadays people are having problems with it,
Hmm.
and you're still like, note lock should exist at in some level, essentially. Like even in laser, I believe you change note lock to a point where it's acceptable, and people have definitely noticed that change. But I remember a time where laser didn't have note lock, and people were like actually actively excited to test laser because it didn't have note lock,
Yeah, well,
and like
the new implementation we've added of Notelock doesn't affect the average user. The only time it would actually kick in is for like new players. So it's basically not there at the moment. I'd definitely give it a try if you haven't already, because no one has complained about the current algorithm we have. And the new algorithm, it was actually decided on with community agreement. Like it was based on a suggestion from a player. I'm pretty sure we implemented that, and that's what we stuck with to this day. And I think it's in a good state. In general, with I know my views on gameplay can be outdated at times, and obviously that's because I just haven't been following each and every every new beat map that gets ranked, every new gameplay technique. I try as much as I can, but it's very hard to keep up. There's so much going on in the EOS community, and I think that's fine. I always listen to people, and we have other developers on the team that are more involved in the gameplay side of things. So it's not just me guiding the decision process here. Um, I obviously try to please everyone as much as we can. So if there is something which needs to change, we'll usually try and account for the previous way as well as the current way. Like in Laser, we have the classic mod now, where it will roll back all the changes we've made in Laser that people don't necessarily agree with, or you can choose one by one which changes you actually want to apply. Things like slider head judgments. All of those are disableable. The new scoring display method, where it's 1 million max per score per bitmap, you can actually change that to go back into a more of a exponential mode. So yeah, going forward, we're gonna try our best to cater to that. Me being at ends with the community specifically, I don't really see that changing. But yeah, as I say, I always try my best to listen, not just try and impose my opinions on everyone. Hopefully that can be seen in how we are moving forward with development.
yeah, like I know every time the community like decides that Peppy doesn't actually understand gameplay, he hasn't played actively in over a decade, etc. They kind of get really upset at that kind of point where we understand the game better than he does, but this is his game, so he has the last say on it. Why does he have the last say on it, etc. But there's I think a happy medium to be achieved there, where there's the intentional design of a game, and then there's the community actually giving their feedback and giving their kind of 2 cents on things, where it can really end up being like the best of both worlds in a sense. And for stuff like note lock, or back when spinner HP drain was a problem that ended up being fixed eventually, like that was a community input, but it was your eventual call to reduce the HP drain on spinners. It was it was all very very good. It was all like something that eventually became a problem, and that eventually ended up being fixed, which a lot of other games wouldn't really attempt. They would either leave the mechanic and just say it's a part of it, or just not listen at all and just ignore, which this isn't about. Like you replied to most kind of mentions, or like stuff like that, with actual reasoning, or sometimes even some type of fix. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I would say that maybe it looks like I push back a lot when people bring up an issue or something, and potentially I take the opposite side, or seem to take the opposite side by trying to ask like, why do we need this? Or it's I always think it's very beneficial to take that perspective, and a lot of people see that and they instantly jump on that, being like, Peppy doesn't understand anything, or uh, he's not following gameplay. He's not a player. He can't make these decisions. But if you don't ask those kinds of questions, if you don't look at both sides of the picture, or try and understand the underlying the nuanced reasons for this being something people want, you can't make a good decision. You can't necessarily, like, I don't like to blindly just be like, oh, a top five top players want this thing changed. That is definitely how we want to take the game forward. I prefer to completely understand uh what changes we're making. So it may look like I'm uninformed or pushing back or whatever you want to call it, but that's maybe just my way of trying to understand the situation. And sometimes you need to, ask the spicy questions to actually get the responses, get the people, get the actual attention on the issue. So people come in and provide very detailed responses that we, as developers, we can actually use to make informed decisions. Maybe that
I
makes
see.
sense. Maybe it doesn't.
That does make sense where people just want to, just ramble on and on about, how this mechanic doesn't work or this mechanic is like bad for the game, and then they do it like kind of behind closed doors, but they don't just ask you or just make an issue or some sort of forum post which is like, can we change this, can we actually change this way or for the better in some other sort of way. They just keep criticizing stuff
Yeah.
instead of actually proposing the hard change.
No, it's definitely like it's very hard to run such a large game slash community in this day and age, because there are so many opinions floating around, and so many things that people want changed, people want improved, and a lot of them are valid, and it's very hard to prioritize and figure out the correct direction forward. And yeah, maybe I am the one point of failure in that it's limited with my time to actually make these decisions or visit these decisions. But I will say that a lot of the internal team that we have will raise problems with me as they happen, and we'll deal with them at that point in time. Uh, you know, I do have that time allocation where we can actually divert from everything that's going on and fix something which matters this moment to the community. And with all these things that we've discussed today, I think those are prime examples of where this has happened. And I think in most of the cases, the outcome has been very positive. So maybe the process taken to reach that outcome was what has pissed people off, or made people more cynical of the game. But I run this game. Um, it's still a passion for me. I don't just do this for money. I do this nothing more than for the community. And in good faith, I think we are making the correct decisions. That's the only decisions I want to make. So that yeah.
Yeah, no, like absolutely. It's not if you didn't have passion for this project, if you didn't have like love for the thing you've created, you wouldn't have spent however many hours you've spent over the last 14, I think, at this point, years, maybe even more. I don't remember exactly how much the game was in development before the release, but like you wouldn't have spent so many hours of your life in the last 14 years just keeping this running, making it better, making new things, and that's something that absolutely deserves respect. And like you can like try and dislike Pepe for many things, but what you can't dislike Pepe for is just the dedication to just keeping this like funny little rhythm game running and like the best it can be for the better part of 2 decades. So yeah,
Yeah, we'll get there.
yeah. Um, the last point was something that we've already kind of touched on, but you've said about having chili repair and Leo FLT kind of manage upkeep of the OWC scene, kind of, and maybe other community tournaments in general. We don't really know, but um, stuff like a lot of people kind of imply that you need some sort of PR representative or something that you shouldn't make yourself so accessible in social media or stuff like that because it brings out the most vulnerable kind of statements, which are the ones that you kind of make off the cuff, the ones that might be a little bit blunt, a little bit rude,
Yeah.
and that kind of gets criticized. And people are just like, oh, we have this this buffoon of a dev who doesn't, he can't be subtle, he can't be uh um like he can't be educated, etc., or
Yep.
something like that, where they kind of take bluntness for stupidity, which isn't the case.
Mm.
So like, there's been like a lot of people just say, "Hey, Peppy, like focus on dev work and like maintaining stuff, and then hire someone or assign someone to reply to the community specifically." And I know that kind of already happens with F, and it kind of already happens with some other people. But like, is there any interest at all that you would have in just not interfacing with social media, or is it something that you actually really want to like maintain the kind of notion of an accessible developer is always there and listening and kind of, if not like accepting stuff, then at least like replying and saying why, instead of just being like the stereotypical kind of, we are a game dev, we have someone that we employ to give out the stereotypical PR responses and to contain any sort of drama, because that's kind of like, that's one of the reasons why eventually there's this whole sort of debate where Peppy needs hate, or Peppy doesn't deserve the hate, or Peppy, etc., etc. Like, it's always centered on your reactions and your
Yeah.
kind of takes on things.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a hard one. I don't like to be at like the center of attention. It's not like I do this because I'm looking to increase my social presence or anything. As the developer of the game, I feel like I owe it to the players, the users, to be accessible, and that's what I've done since day one. That's how I started us, and I don't see that changing because as a user, I always look at every time I do something in life, I look at it from the other person's perspective and put myself in their shoes and see what I would expect. So if I was a user of a product, I would expect the developer to reply to me directly. And that's just my personal opinion. So that's how I'm gonna continue to do things going forward. Um, yeah, I don't I guess it's nothing's gonna really change from that side. I'm not really gonna change how I interface with social media. So we'll probably have more of these discussions in the future. But maybe this kind of drama, it keeps some people entertained. Maybe that's a good side effect of it. I don't know.
Like, I don't know if they're exactly entertained, but
Well, some people
if
definitely are. Yeah, obviously, others are offended or disappointed, or there's a variety of emotions you can feel from.
but if it happens to, like, if your social media presence and your like accessibility, I
Mm,
guess would be a good word, happens to help give these kinds of like these kinds of talks where you can actually like give your perspective and have your opinion not necessarily summed up to something taken out of context, like a sound bite or a tweet taken out of context or a Reddit reply, etc.
Yeah.
like if it helps like bring this kind of like um clarity to the situations that you're involved in, then I think that if there's anything you should do is that you should actually like not stop the social media presence, but instead just have more often like some sort of talk or some sort of like maybe once every month or two
How about
have just sort of a
how about
venting session.
every fortnight, and we can call it the OS community meetings because that's exactly what we're doing with those.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's like a really good that's really good progress in terms of just understanding the point of view of someone that we interface with on a daily basis for some of us, and we sometimes think they're wrong, or sometimes we think they're unjustified, and that
Yeah.
really helps that sort of clarity to not have like the disconnect that is perceived between player base and dev, and instead have this more like friendly and understandable environment where people can really just get behind something that the dev is trying to push, or people can like understand what the dev is trying to say when they deny some change, or they like say that it's maybe a little bit, not that it's not possible, but it's like a little bit too hard, or a little bit too too grand of a thing to implement right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's exactly why we have the community meetings these days. So I hope that we're making good forward progress there. Um, I don't know if that's going to decrease the rate I tweet or anything. I don't actually use Twitter that much. I make sure to reply to anyone who sends me a tweet, unless it's stupid crap. And I'm not going to change that. I'll always give a reply, and those replies may be blunt and they may lead to further dramas. But yeah, we can discuss it in another part two of this series, I guess, in the future if that's required. Touch wood, it won't be. Touch wood, I'm actually learning to avoid, the stupid kind of
Yeah, the
interactions
avoid
which reach this level in the first place. But
it's um it's very nice to just have this sort of environment to hear you, not only in a more human side of way, instead of just the the lead figure of us and this kind of like big Twitter kind of person who is just replying with 280 characters, and instead see like a thought out response, very friendly, very understanding response coming from dev of the game we love. So it's really nice. It was really nice being with you here, and like I think giving you like kind of like putting up the or batting up the ball so you can like actually see the or not see, but actually like reply to a lot of these like things that might have made people a little bit resentful towards you, or something like that. I think it was a very productive time. It was a very nice time, at least coming Jesus, sorry. At least coming from my end,
yeah,
which had a really nice 2 hours and like almost 2 hours and a half.
yeah,
It felt like it just flew by.
it tends to do that. Same thing happened when I did a long interview with Koi Fisher. But yeah, thanks for your questions. I think we covered good ground. Obviously, there's going to be people that are either not happy with the resolutions of any of these points we've discussed, or they're going to bring up like 10 different ones. Yeah, it's going to happen, but feel free to come by on to the next community meeting, which will probably be next year. If you have any questions to ask, you can ask these kinds of questions there. We don't limit what you can say or what you can't say. So, yeah, I mean, myself and the rest of the team are open to discussion. We are always willing to share whatever we can to clear up any misconceptions, or hopefully make people feel uh, more wanted. I don't know.
Or, or
Appreciated. Because I
yeah.
appreciate everyone that plays this game as much as
Aw.
people appreciate me.
But yeah, thank you, Peppy, for
Yeah.
letting me be here.
Yeah, thanks for your questions. Thanks for making this happen. Thanks for leading the
Thank
talk, leading the
you.
discussion.
I guess if the next community meeting is only going to be next year, then Merry Christmas to you, Merry Christmas to all the listeners, and Happy Holidays. And yeah, just I hope that this talk was productive and it let everyone at least calm their calm their anger, or maybe like understand Pepe better and understand the decisions he makes, and whatever he or whenever he has to act in a maybe controversial way, that at least there's like very reasonable thought behind it.
Yep. You mentioned in your original tweet long, maybe all I want for Christmas is for Peppy to listen. So I hope you got your Christmas wish.
That was a great wish that I think I got in full. So
Yeah,
thank you very
cool.
much for your wonderful
Cheers. Yeah. Have a
yeah.
good holiday season. Have a good Christmas. Same to everyone that's listening. Thanks for tuning in, listening to this 2.5 hour long meeting. We'll upload this to YouTube for anyone that missed it.
Thank you, man.
Good night.
Good night.